There are moments in television history that stop you cold. Moments where the noise of everyday life fades out, and something genuinely human breaks through the screen and reaches you wherever you are sitting. Richard Goodall's audition on America's Got Talent Season 19 was exactly that kind of moment. A middle-aged school janitor from Tote, Indiana, walked onto one of the biggest stages in American entertainment, opened his mouth, and reminded millions of people what it feels like to believe in something. The standing ovation was instant. The golden buzzer was earned. The tears, both on stage and in living rooms across the country, were real. But then something strange happened. The cameras stopped rolling, the confetti settled to the floor, and Richard Goodall seemed to quietly disappear from the conversation. No explosive music career announcements. No tabloid drama. No viral feud with a record label. Just silence, or at least the kind of silence that feels suspicious in an age when fame is supposed to be loud and constant. So what actually happened to Richard Goodall after his unforgettable moment on AGT? The answer is simultaneously surprising, deeply moving, and in many ways, more inspiring than the audition itself. To understand what happened after the show, you first have to understand who Richard Goodall was before it. This is not a man who stumbled into talent late in life. Richard grew up in Tote with music sewn into the fabric of his daily existence. As a child, he would retreat to his bedroom and sing along to whatever came through the radio, not as performance practice, but as pure joy. That distinction matters. A lot of people sing to be heard. Richard sang because he could not imagine not singing. It was as natural to him as breathing. He joined his high school chorus and discovered early on that his voice had a quality that reached people emotionally. After graduation, he became part of a gospel choir, where he sang for roughly 8 years. That gospel experience gave Richard something that studio training alone rarely provides: a connection between the song and the soul behind it. Gospel music demands authenticity. You cannot fake conviction in that tradition, and Richard never tried to. When that choir eventually disbanded in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, Richard lost one of his most important musical outlets. But he did not abandon the music. He carried it with him to work, singing in the hallways of Chauncey Rose Middle School in Tote, where he had been working as a janitor for over 2 decades. His colleagues and the students knew him as the man who sang while he swept. The kids would stop and listen. Some would laugh, some would cheer, and some would quietly stand still in the hallway, absorbing something they could not quite name. Richard was not trying to audition for anyone. He was simply living out loud in the only way he knew how. The turning point came in the summer of 2022, and it arrived not on a grand stage but in a park. Richard performed an emotionally charged rendition of Journey's iconic anthem, Don't Stop Believin', at an event at Davis Park Elementary School in Tote. Someone recorded it. Someone shared it. And then the internet did what the internet occasionally does when it encounters something genuinely moving. It paid attention. The video went viral, spreading across TikTok and other platforms with a speed that caught Richard completely off guard. What nobody anticipated was who would be watching. Steve Perry, the original lead vocalist of Journey and the man whose voice defined the song for an entire generation, found the video and left a comment expressing his admiration. That alone would have been enough to make most people feel like they were dreaming. But the official Journey band account also shared the clip, essentially giving their blessing to a stranger who had honored their music with everything he had. Then Howie Mandel, comedian and sitting judge on America's Got Talent, reacted to Richard's TikTok and openly encouraged him to audition for the show. Richard's first reaction was skepticism. In an era of fake accounts and elaborate pranks, he was careful not to let himself believe something that might turn out to be a cruel illusion. He verified each account carefully before allowing himself to feel the full weight of what was happening. When he finally confirmed that the support was genuine, the path forward became clear. Auditioning for AGT was not a casual decision for Richard. It required him to confront fears that had nothing to do with singing. He had rarely traveled far from Tote, and the audition process meant boarding a plane for the first time in his life. For a man who had spent decades finding comfort in routine and community, stepping into the unknown like that took real courage. But the students at his school had been encouraging him for years, and their belief in him had quietly been building his own. He went. What happened on that stage has been documented extensively, but it bears revisiting because the details matter. Richard chose Don't Stop Believin' Again, not out of laziness or a lack of range, but because the song meant something deeply personal to him. He had lived inside that song's message during some of the hardest years of his life. When he sang it, he was not performing a cover. He was testifying. The audience felt the difference immediately. Within seconds of his first note, the energy in the theater shifted. People leaned forward. Conversations stopped. Judge Heidi Klum, visibly moved by what she was hearing and seeing, reached forward and slammed the golden buzzer. Confetti exploded across the stage. Simon Cowell, a man not known for easy praise, called Richard's performance extraordinary. Sofia Vergara described him as a true discovery. The moment became one of the most watched clips from that entire season of the show. Backstage, away from the cameras, Richard reportedly wept. He later described the experience as surreal, struggling to reconcile the person he knew himself to be, someone who cleaned classrooms and took out trash and walked to work each morning, with the scene unfolding around him. The disconnect was not painful. It was overwhelming in the best possible way. What followed the golden buzzer moment revealed the most important thing about Richard Goodall's character. Fame, when it arrives unexpectedly, tends to act as a kind of pressure test. It reveals whether a person's identity is rooted in something solid or simply in the circumstances around them. For some people who find sudden celebrity, the temptation to abandon their previous life entirely is overwhelming. The old life starts to feel like a costume they were wearing until something better came along. Richard did not feel that way. After the show wrapped and the media attention reached its initial peak, he went back to his job. He returned to Chauncey Rose Middle School, picked up his mop, and went to work. His colleagues described a man who seemed genuinely unchanged by what had happened to him. His warmth was the same. His humor was the same. His dedication to the students was the same. He had not suddenly decided that janitorial work was beneath him. He had decided, apparently without much internal debate, that the life he had built was worth protecting. This decision was not widely understood by people on the outside looking in. Many viewers expected him to quit his job and move to Los Angeles within weeks of the golden buzzer. When he did not, some found it confusing. But Richard was operating from a framework that the entertainment industry rarely encounters. A man who genuinely did not need fame to feel valuable. He had been valuable all along, singing in hallways, showing up every day, being a constant presence in the lives of children who needed steady, caring adults around them. The show had not created his worth. It had simply let more people see what was already there. The balancing act that followed was genuinely difficult, and Richard was honest about that. As his music career began generating real opportunities, he found himself navigating competing demands on his time and energy. His school was supportive and gave him flexibility when he needed to travel for performances or television appearances, but the tension between his two worlds was real and unavoidable. He was invited to sing the national anthem for the Indiana Pacers, performing before thousands of basketball fans in a professional arena. He opened for Howie Mandel at a live comedy show, sharing a stage with someone he had only ever seen on television. Each of these experiences expanded his world in ways that were thrilling but also disorienting for a man who had spent most of his adult life in the same city, doing the same job, surrounded by the same people. Through all of it, he kept returning to the school, not because he lacked options, but because it grounded him. The school represented continuity in a period of rapid and unpredictable change. The hallways where he had sung for years were the same hallways where his story had quietly been building long before anyone put a camera on him. Walking through those doors each morning was his way of staying connected to the version of himself that existed before the spotlight. He acknowledged in various conversations that a decision would eventually need to be made. The music industry is demanding, and it does not wait indefinitely for people who are not fully committed. But Richard consistently expressed a desire to delay that crossroads for as long as possible. He did not want to rush. He did not want to make a choice he would regret. He wanted to honor both parts of his life for as long as honoring both remained possible. Away from the professional considerations, Richard's personal life during this period carried weight that most of his new fans did not know about. Behind the humble smile and the extraordinary voice was a man who had walked through genuine grief not long before his AGT moment arrived. Richard had been married for roughly 3 decades, a long and meaningful partnership that shaped who he became. His first wife passed away from cancer on June 19, 2021, less than 2 years before his golden buzzer moment. Richard did not speak about this loss publicly in any detailed way. He kept it close. But the emotional depth that poured out of him every time he sang was not accidental. The man who stood on that AGT stage and sang about not stopping believing had actually been tested on that exact principle in the most personal way imaginable. He had watched someone he loved suffer and leave, and he had chosen to keep going. The song was not a performance piece for Richard. It was a survival anthem. In time, he found love again. He began a relationship with a woman named Angie Van Oven, and in a genuinely extraordinary piece of timing, the two married just before the final episode of his AGT season aired. His new chapter in love coincided almost perfectly with his new chapter in public life. Richard spoke about Angie with the kind of quiet reverence that suggests someone who has lost love once and therefore knows exactly how rare and precious it is. She became both his emotional anchor and his greatest supporter as the demands of his growing music profile continued to evolve. The community around Richard also played a role that deserves recognition. When it became clear that competing on AGT involved travel costs and expenses that were simply beyond Richard's financial reach as a school janitor, people responded. A Te'ote resident named Chris Bond launched a GoFundMe campaign to help cover Richard's travel and accommodation costs for the competition. The campaign raised $15,000, contributed by 382 separate donors, and it met its goal in under 2 weeks. That number is worth sitting with for a moment. 382 people chose to reach into their own pockets to help a janitor from Indiana sing on a television show. They did it not because they expected anything in return, but because they believed in him. The community that Richard had served for over 2 decades served him back when he needed it. That reciprocal loyalty said something meaningful about the kind of person he had been long before America learned his name. Richard was also a member of a local Te'ote band called Manapa, a detail that surprised many of his new fans who had imagined him as a solo artist singing in isolation. The band had existed before the viral video, but the TikTok moment transformed their situation overnight. Suddenly, they were receiving invitations to perform across the region, and by midsummer their calendar was packed. Richard described the experience with characteristic gratitude, publicly thanking his bandmates for their hard work and their manager for the successful bookings. His collaboration with Rudy Cardenas, a Venezuelan-American singer who gained recognition on American Idol and who had his own connection to rock music, further expanded Richard's profile. Cardenas had seen the viral video and reached out personally, inviting Richard to perform with him